You can change the process, the policy, and the plan. But if you don't change how people relate, nothing really changes. Welcome to the Voice of Impact, where belief meets action. Our podcast amplifies stories, systems, and solutions behind meaningful change. I am your host, Robert Ndoping. Today's conversation invites us to rethink leadership and organizational growth, not as a technical challenge, but as a deeply human rooted connection with trust and how we relate to one another at work. My guest today is Melissa Borowicz, CEO and owner of the Utech Group, and an organizational development expert who believes the heart of any business is human connection. With a unique background that includes a master's in marriage and family therapy, Melissa brings a rare and powerful relational lens to leadership and organizational change. For over 20 years, she has worked with organizations ranging from 10 to 3,000 employees, supporting them through complex transitions, helping leaders unlock their fullest potential. Melissa's relaxed, grounded approach allows her to create a shared language across the entire organization, from executive leadership to frontline teams, providing that sustainable performance which isn't driven by process alone, but by the quality of relationships within the system. Melissa, we're glad to have you today on Voices of Impact.
Robert, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, as we always do at Voice of Impact, before the organizations, the leadership, the strategy that you work on, we'd like to start with you. What's the story? What led you to the work that you're doing at the intersection of relationships and businesses?
Yeah, you know, it's that's a great question. Going back to when I was working on my master's degree, I'm someone who's very goal oriented and have a vision of like, this is what I'm going to do. And so I was pursuing my degree in marriage and family therapy and social welfare, just with this drive of knowing that I wanted to have an impact on others. And I was in the field and I was it was okay, but I felt always compelled that there's something more. Like, and I don't know what that is, but there's something more that I want to do. And um, in our business, we're actually a second generation family business, but I had brought my former boss to a workshop that my father had been doing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and where I was living at the time, and my boss was great. And we went to this workshop and my dad was speaking about a book that he had written, and it was all about leadership, but looking at our life journey and the ups and downs in our life and how that shapes our values and our belief systems and how we lead our organizations and our teams. And I was with this group of CEOs. I'm like, this is fantastic. And at the end of the day, my boss was like, Melissa, this is great stuff, but, it's just not for me. And I was like, oh, I had no expectation that you were going to do anything with this. But what I did recognize is that I felt a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. And with that spark, I knew I had to do something different, and I didn't know what that was. But I ended up leaving the job I was in, and then got recruited by one of my dad's employees behind his back to to join. He's like, "You got to join the business, Melissa." I'm like, "You're crazy." Um, But he had said something that really was, at the time, I didn't understand how impactful it was. But he's like, Melissa, you may not have the business background yet, but I can teach you that. He's like, what you have is an understanding of relationships, and that's really hard to teach. Um, so I joined our business it'll be 22 years this April. Um, and that's how I started. But really, what drew me in was knowing that I was going to be a part of something where I would be able to have an impact with people. And what better way to do that than by working with entire organizations where you're able to impact people's lives?
Oh, yeah, I don't know, it's a soft, warm story, but almost a natural flow. But I just want to go back again and touch a little bit on your background. How did your background in marriage and family therapy shape how you see
Mm,
organizations right now?
yeah. Um, I Whether you're working with a family or you're working with a team, it's a relational system. And, it's just the context of an organization is bigger, but you're still a part of a system and how people interact and work together to live out the purpose, whether again in a family or within an organization, is really important. And sometimes that purpose isn't aligned or it's unclear. Sometimes interactions between people just aren't effective. And sometimes you might have people who are in the wrong roles or um, in the wrong seat on the bus, so to speak. But being able to go in and understand, a systems perspective to how relationships work, and not just focus on an individual piece or part of a business, but understand kind of the broader context and how people impact each other, how structure impacts relationships. But really, it's the relational piece of, when we can understand how we relate, how we can tap into each other and leverage the strengths and talents of those that we work with. It can improve collaboration and problem solving and um, our ability to navigate and work through challenging situations and have resiliency and trust in one another to do so. So there's so many things that I maybe didn't even understand 20 plus years ago from my marriage and family therapy background that I use every single day in the work that I do to just help foster that connection between people.
Oh, you talk about the work you do, and I just want to touch on something. Was there a moment when you realize relational dynamics were the missing link in leadership development? Just linking that to your background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know that there was a clear moment or if it's just always been a part of me, Robert, of like seeing the world through a relational lens. Um, but what I will say is, relationships are hard. And what I find most often when I'm going in and working with an organization is, they've maybe looked at process and structure and um, business strategy, which are all really important things to do. But when those things still aren't producing, the results that an organization wants, sometimes that missing component can be how are people working together? Is there alignment? Are people able to communicate and work through issues towards a as they work towards a common goal. But the people side of things, even though many people say it's the soft side of business, it's really the hard work is the people side of change.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Um, I mean, we cross path in the types of work we do. I definitely agree with you there. So you've worked with organizations of, many sizes. From your
Yeah.
perspective, how do organizational systems either strengthen or strain human connection?
Oh, that seems like a simple question, but that can be complex too. How do systems, I I would say I can't help but think in stories and examples, so I hope that's okay if I use
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
story.
Please just go ahead.
Um, but I'm thinking of a family business that I had worked with, and this is true for many, founder-led organizations that I've partnered with over the years, where um, the founder was the driver. It was their idea that started the business. Um, they grew the business, so they know inherently and intuitively, the systems of, the business and side of things and how that works, their customers, their people, and there can get to a point where there's a lot of dependency on that leader, and what they do can seem a lot of the things that they do can be hidden and not overtly seen by everyone else. So making like the what's kind of secret and behind the scenes more overt so you can develop, the infrastructure and the people behind it is important. Um but yeah, I've worked with a lot of leaders in what I would say is more of that hub and spoke leadership style. Not that they want to create that, but they have, just by nature of the force of their personality, their charisma, the passion and drive they have for what they do, and that magnetism that they have where people want to follow them. And then when they get to a point where they're like, gosh, this is not sustainable for me, we're growing, or I'm ready to retire and transition, that's a lot to break out in terms of, okay, how does the organization work without this key person that kind of holds things together? How do you start to identify what's made an organization successful, which I'd say their formula for success? How do you identify people and with potential that can step into roles, but actually breaking out roles within an organization when it's all been kind of centralized and um, a couple of people, maybe even one person, and developing, the system, developing a team to learn, okay, how do we function together? How do we both look at a structure that's going to support our continued success, but how do we need to lead and interact and build trust with each other that we can carry this organization forward? So I feel like that's, Robert, where I'm spending a lot of my time in the recent years is situate transitions and, businesses that are looking at, gosh, there's all this knowledge that a founder or that a leadership team has had. If we're looking to retire or we're looking at growth, how do we prepare other leaders to be able to understand how to think, how to make decisions, how to relate to each other and engage in problem solving and collaboration so that we can continue to thrive as a system, but as an organizational unit here.
Yeah, you touch on something really essential. That's succession planning.
Mm.
Um, it's so essential in every business. Would you also say, leaders sometimes unintentionally create relational barriers when they don't think about succession planning?
Mm. Yes. Sometimes um it's not even like a conscious thing that they're trying to do, But but yeah, I would say I just had a meeting not too long ago, Robert, where we were talking about a realization of companies that sometimes wait too long. That's usually the case. Like I would. say it's a rarity that a leader is like very proactive looking at, hey, I want to retire 10 years from now. How do I start preparing leaders for the future, when I step out so it's a smooth transition. We more often hear like, hey, I'm ready to retire in a year. How do I how do I start getting ready so that, and I'm like, all right, let's kind of evaluate who do you have and how do things work, and I do think sometimes like the barrier can be like, oh, I've got all the time in the world before I need to retire, and maybe underestimating how much they do and the value that they bring, and how much knowledge they hold in their heads um, that hasn't been translated to other people. It can be a barrier, and sometimes it's trust, and and I think that fear of like, okay, if I let this go, what's next for me? What's that path look like, and what's my vision for my future if I end up developing others and focusing on succession, and now what's my role? What's my value and purpose look like?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but yes, I think any of us can be our own biggest roadblocks to facilitating that sort of change and succession planning.
Oh, yeah. And how would you say, how does like unresolved tension at the leadership level ripple
Mm-hmm.
through the organization? I mean, especially some of these cases where there's so much tension at the leadership level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen this too in the work that you do. So we could probably have a long conversation about that. Uh, I I think, it does have an impact. I mean, there's situations I've seen where unresolved tension leads to silos where, full departments don't work together or people avoid working together. And then you have these like departmental walls that go up where people that, you know, areas that should be collaborating and working with one another aren't. It just makes work more difficult. Um, I've I've seen leaders literally say, "Oh, there's tension here. I'm going to just move people into different offices and different floors, so we don't have to see the tension or experience it, even though it's still there." And then, these individuals still need to work together because their roles cross. And um, so it's more of like kind of the workarounds, the wasted time and energy, um, the emotional distancing and cutoff that can happen. Um, and then over time, that just leads to finger pointing and blame and defensiveness that can ripple through an organization where you see a lack of true accountability and alignment.
Oh yeah, you you hit the nail right on the head there. Those silos and those walls that could definitely be put, especially when a system is not well established.
Yeah.
In the case where there's tension at the top, even culture changes, it's so easy for complete breakdown and where departments actually stay on their own and those walls, like you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head. I want to touch a little bit about systems because sometimes systems could help this problem. What would be
Mm.
your recommendation in establishing a system which could help if this type of either cultural shift, some of these unresolved tensions happen? How could an established system support?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And well, that's a really great point, because I had um some of the work that we do, Robert, is in the space of helping leadership teams or owners or executives establish their values and culture, and that's one way of creating a system. Um, so when you have like unresolved tension and you have ways of operating, it starts to form these unspoken rules of, well, that, we don't hold people accountable, or no one gets fired here, or my voice doesn't matter, or things like that that start to like affect how an organization believes. And establishing values based on what's made you successful, but also looking at how can we be more consistent in living out who we say we are as an organization. And that's in any industry. We've worked with manufacturing and um, construction and property management to nonprofits and religious organizations. So I say we're industry agnostic because it's at the heart of any organization is people. Um, but yeah, establishing values and what your culture is about, and then figuring out how do we operationalize this? What are the beliefs that we hold? How are we going to behave and interact with each other to live these out? Um, and and then having the organization not just put the values on the wall, but truly, like I said, like put them into practice, starting with leadership, modeling that, so it's not just something that you're giving words to but not living. So having leadership live it and model it, and then having your organization understand what does it mean to work here. How do we handle problems? What's our method for working through conflict and issues and addressing issues? And having that as a framework or a system can be that starting point of laying the foundation. And but it's that foundation that's really important, of like, here's what we believe in, what we stand for, how we operate, um, and the leaders are modeling it and setting the tone for the rest of the organization to live that out as well.
Oh, yes, the foundation, the values, the mission, modeling it. It's so, so important. Let me relate this to you. What did you have to unlearn about leadership as you moved
Mhm.
deeper into your own work and your business?
That's a great question too. Um, oh, I think one of the biggest things that I had to unlearn was the idea of leadership being a certain way. Um, Coming into a family business and working with my father, you know, like he's really gifted. He's talented in the work that he does. And I would say for the first 2 years at least of my career, I worked really hard to lead like him. And 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 I failed, like, and I was miserable. And and I joke about this. At the time it wasn't funny, but now I can laugh about it. But I probably cried more cumulatively in those first couple years than I had in my entire life leading up to that. Um, because I just wasn't consistent with who I am. And so I think one of the things I had to unlearn was just that leadership was supposed to be a certain way. And I had to do some discovery and just myself, some learning of like, what is my leadership? Like what are my values and beliefs, and being okay with that being different than what I had been seeing. I'm I'm a collaborative leader, um, people centered. I'm more, maybe a little bit more patient in some ways, or maybe a more steady approach than my father. And so So there's just things that I had to uncover and learn about myself and work I had to do on myself too with, understanding the ways that maybe I held myself back and was limiting my own potential. And I remember just different moments, Robert, when I just was peeling back the layers of the onion and just getting really comfortable in who I am and my style and working through some of my own baggage that then um, I could be authentic in who I am and lead in my way. So,
Oh, yes. Lots of things we've talked about relates to change, and especially relational change often comes with resistance. I mean, for
mm,
you, you've touched on a few things, but what's something in your work that didn't unfold the way you
mm,
expected? And what did that teach you?
mm. I, well, there's so many things. Um, One of the things just like I guess personally in, I when I stepped into the business, I there was a lot that I had to work through, but one of the early expectations that others had was, oh, Melissa's coming into this family business. You're the next CEO. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing yet back then. And so I'm not sure that that's my future or not. And so I had to wrestle with that. My brother joined the business and he and I had a, had, I think we weren't sure how that was going to unfold, of like how the business was going to evolve, how we were going to work together. We'd always been really close, but sometimes, when you start working together, it brings up a lot of tension. And there was a lot that we had to tackle and work through over the years. And now we are in such a great spot and work so well together. But there was some times that it was extraordinary painful. And, having grown up together and been really close growing up, I don't know that I expected that it was going to be so hard. Um, we went through a startup together. We launched a business within, the Utech Group, and he led that, and that was a learning and a lot of things that happened that didn't go the like it wasn't a smooth linear path. There was, challenges of how do we get this? It's an analytics company, and how do we get this launched and going and sell it and market it, and that created a lot of opportunities for tension to emerge in our relationship. Um, so there's a lot of things that didn't go exactly how I would have thought, but I think in all of that, I guess I've gotten really comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty, and have just grown to appreciate it in some ways, because that's where growth and learning can happen, is when you're challenging yourself and moving outside of your comfort zone. You don't know exactly how it exactly is going to work out, um but diving in and figuring it out is kind of part of the challenge and part of the fun too. So yes. So there's been many things, and I have personal things that I've gone through as well uh that I can talk about, as we continue on of, yeah, that was not part of the plan.
And I mean, there's something you mentioned which I've touched quite a bit in most of the things I've done, and which is growth never happens within your comfort zone. It
Mm,
happens outside of your comfort zone. And there's always resistance. But
mm,
normally, when you go through that, you feel it. You feel the
hmm
difference. You feel the change. And I'm just so appreciative that You found that as you pushed outside of your own comfort zone.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, and I have someone on my team just yesterday was like, "You love change." And I like, well, I think you just get used to like, hey, that's exactly what you said. Change happens outside of your comfort zone, that the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with this is good. This is where growth is happening.
Oh, yes. And I mean, in all of this, how do you stay grounded and neutral when you're holding tension between people, teams, and leadership groups?
Mm, I think I think that takes continued work. I wouldn't say that I'm a pro at that because it's hard, right? When you care about people and you want to see um, people work through painful things to get to a better place. And especially, I think how I'm wired is I see the potential of what could be, and I have to be careful in my work to not want it more than others, for if that makes sense, to so that others are doing the work and I'm not getting like, oh, this is what could be, this is what's possible, and then suddenly I own the outcome more than others do. So, but when there's tension and we're in the midst of navigating that with others, I think it is helpful that people know that I'm invested and that I care. And I also need to remind myself often that their pain is not mine to carry, and to work on boundaries with that too. Um, and I I've had to work. I have a few years ago I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, multiple sclerosis, and it's really that's been an interesting part of my journey because I've always been others focused, and this is something that has taught me a lot of lessons about focusing on my needs and paying attention to that, because there's real consequences if I lose sight of taking care of myself and having taking on too much tension, relational tension in situations, to make sure I'm staying grounded and present with myself too, and not overextending or um, exerting too much energy into places that I shouldn't be.
Now, that makes a lot of sense, especially with everything you've discovered and with all of your knowledge and strength, and really finding that place and a balance between the both. I think it really grounds you. I mean, when you look at organizations today, especially in times of disruptions and uncertainty, what kind of leadership does those moments
Mm.
demand?
Yeah, um I I really believe right now in today's environment especially, leadership does require, I mean, having vision, but also like things are changing so fast, and so every day there's new things that are coming out, and the change and rapid growth with things like AI and technology and systems that are changing. I think just I think having vision, but also being adaptable and flexible, and but I would say leaders who are collaborative, who understand like I can't know everything because the world is moving quickly, but I know how to surround myself with people who maybe know more than I do in certain areas, who have strengths and gifts that are complementary or different than mine, and to embrace um, not knowing it all and embrace knowing that, hey, what I'm really good at is mobilizing people and getting the right people in the room so that we can solve complex challenges together. That's those types of leaders are able to energize people, you know, value the like others, appreciate people's differences and get people working together towards a common vision. That's what
Yeah,
I see. I don't
that's a
know if you see anything differently, but that's what I'm seeing right now.
No, you're right. I mean, so many things are changing. I mean, especially you mentioned AI. I mean, one, people need to catch up to it. You,
Yeah.
you either catch up or you're thrown out. I mean, I remember the story of Kodak and how they didn't embrace technology and what happened to them. They were kicked out of business, and there are many, many examples of this thing. So one, of course, you have to catch up to it, but I agree with you. I mean, there's just so much that happens. And you also talked about how grounded you are. And I think the
Mm,
moment also demands leadership to be the leader to be grounded. Because if you're not grounded, you could be moved.
mm,
We also talked about
hmm
systems, right? So once you build those systems, it helps because you can definitely go back to your systems, your
hmm
vision, your mission, what you've set, for your organization. It's so easy to be able to help navigate some of those trying moments, as we say. And I mean, the world is in those moments now, and organizations as well are facing lots of that, especially with the economy. I mean, sometimes it hits in a different way, small, big, it doesn't matter the size. So I agree with everything you've said. I'm just adding some of these extra things, which also supports. Yeah. Yeah. So if you had an advice for a leader that's currently stuck managing people, but knows something needs to shift, what would be your advice?
Mm. I I think it is wise to first do the hard work to look inward. If you know something needs to shift, I think sometimes we can look up to the outside world and to look at, well, other people need to change, or my life would be better only if, you know, these like people were more responsive, or they got it, or understood, or didn't do this, or whatever, fill in the blank. But if we first look at ourselves to say, okay, if I'm not getting the results that I want or having the impact that I want, what is it within me that's creating those results? And what might I need to look at and face to understand how I might need to change and grow to be more effective and more consistent in reinforcing and modeling what I want, and how I want others to operate. So I think if it's not easy, it's easier to focus on how we want other people to change. But I think if we take a step back and look at, okay, how am I creating exactly what I want because of the systems that are in place and how I'm showing up. And if I'm not happy, how can I do that work to look at how I can do the change internally and then create the change externally with others.
Yeah, I agree with you. Change begins from within. I mean, there's so many
Mm-hmm.
things and you also talked about embodiment. There's just so many things that you can embody, which really helps to be able to move things forward. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was a really amazing answer that was just on point. Um, as we are moving towards wrapping up a few things here, Melissa, is there anything that you wish that asked you? Any questions at all, or something you want to say directly to someone listening right now, who may be navigating some leadership and organizational change or issues? Something from Utech, something from you, that you want to share?
Mm. I Well, just one thing that comes to mind that's been, I think, really transformational and helpful for me is maybe two things actually. One is that, for all of us, there's things that in life happen to us. There's things that maybe we didn't plan for, or challenges that we're facing that we may say, I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to take this on. Um, and we can either be in a position where where we're victim to the things that happen to us, or where we can say, okay, this happened. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to take charge of the circumstances in front of me uh, to move forward? And I think that mindset of either things happen to me or I'm in charge of the results that I want to get in my life um, is just an important mindset shift to that's really helpful, I think, for any of us, because any of us can get into that spot of feeling like, oh man, I feel sorry for myself right now. Like this really stinks. Um, so that can be helpful. And I think then as you're working through that, to think about what am I moving towards? What's the vision that I have that I want to move towards? Not the things of like, I don't want this to happen, or I'm afraid of this, or can't do this and shouldn't, all the woulda, shoulda, couldas. Um, but to stop and say, okay, like, yeah, I can clearly articulate all the things that I don't want to have happen. What do I want? And and how, and that can look like how you're leading your organization, your team, your family. Um, but having that picture that you're moving towards can help create change and consistency in every area of your life. Um, Simple things like my husband and I are very aligned around like what's our purpose in our marriage, and it's impact. And we do it differently. He has a company, he does basketball training, which is very different from what I do, but in the work that we do, we share this drive and this vision of like, well, we want to impact. And so that changes how we parent, how we engage our children's friends and girlfriends now. It changes how we show up at work, like, and it helps filter out the things that we say yes to and the things that we say no to. So, getting clear on what is it that you're moving towards, and not what you're moving away from, but what do you truly want in your life?
You mentioned a word there, and I really love that word. What's your purpose in life? Have a
Mm,
picture of the direction that you want to go and walk towards it. That's life changing
mm,
to most people because finding a purpose, it's so key for me. Part of my purpose is what I'm doing. It's really changing lives, impacting people. And what I do
yeah.
as a business is tied to my purpose. Just like you said, your husband and yourself are doing things differently, but all aligned towards a purpose, which is just so amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I believe it must have touched somebody. So we have a tradition at Voice of Impact, which is our web die, like you can see here on the screen.
Oh yeah.
And there are a couple of words on it, and I'm going to read them to you because you might not be able to read them as I turn them around. So the first one is make a difference, rebound, rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience. I'll repeat again, make a
Mm,
difference, rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience. So I'll ask you to choose two of the words. One should reflect your own journey, and then the other word should be a word you want to leave for a listener listening to us today. And you can speak to them.
mm. What a great tradition that you have on your show. That's awesome. I would say for my own journey, the word that stands out to me the most is stronger. I think I connect that to resiliency, um, and I've overcome some tough stuff in my life, and um with optimism and a lot of joy. But also, there's been some hard things, and I think each battle or each challenge that life has thrown my way on the other side of it, I recognize the strength not only in myself but in the people that surround me too. So I would say stronger, and then the the word that I would leave with others that stood out to me, that was the first thing that you said, was make a difference. Um, and I think that recognition, or for me, I'm thinking like, everyone has that opportunity and ability to make a difference in their world and the relationships that they're a part of. It doesn't have to be this huge moment that we're thinking like, I got to do this big thing to make a difference. It can be in the little everyday actions and relationships that we have, where we make a difference in the lives of others. And so that's what I would hope listeners would say is, or listen to and say, what are ways that I am making a difference and that I can continue to make a difference, and see that in myself.
Beautiful. So, Melissa, we're wrapping up here, but I want to give you an opportunity to tell listeners how they could connect with you. If, let's say, someone has listened to you, someone is interested in the work you do, and really wants to connect with you, what's the best way? What are some methods that they could reach you?
Sure. Well, you can find me on our website, which is Utech, UTECHOD.com. And I am on LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and just look, linkedin.com/ Melissa Borowicz, you will find me that way. And email is always a good method to reach out to me too. So that's Melissa, Melissa, at utechod.com.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for reminding us that leadership isn't just about direction. It's also about relationship. It's about presence and the courage to engage honestly with people. Today's conversation reminds us that impact inside organizations doesn't come to fix people. It comes from creating environments where people can thrive together. So, to the people listening right now, how do you relate? How do you listen? And the relationships you cultivate could create a better place. We are Ndoping and Co performance consultants and designers. We design systems. We are strategy coaches. We support entrepreneurs and nonprofits in establishing a sustainable system for measurable output. We coach, we clarify, we redefine, and we support organizations and entrepreneurial strategy, and we build capacity for alignment, especially to sustain a system redefined or built that gives you back time, establishes a work culture, and provides the strength to withstand some of the turbulences of a business. We have been privileged to have Melissa with us today, who actually does some amazing things that are aligned with us as a business. And she's giving some amazing answers and directions. If you're a business leader, you're an individual, you're listening to this podcast, and you really want to get in touch with Melissa, please, she's giving her contacts. And you could also reach out to us if you want to get in touch with her. Our website is www.ndopingco.com. Our email is coaching@ndoping, ndopingco.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Ndoping Coaching, and on Instagram, Ndoping_co. This has been Voice of Impact. Until next time, keep listening, keep integrating, and keep using your voice. Melissa, we're grateful that you created time to spend with us today.
Thank you.
And it's very simple. Empower as many people as possible. Empower as many leaders as possible. Touch as many, professionals as I can. Be able to make a difference.